Sadiq Khan took to Twitter today to propose one of the most craziest proposals I've ever seen in the UK. Skilled workers from the EU are crucial to London's success. That's why I'm calling on the PM to devolve some immigration powers to London to support our capital's economy. This tweet was in response to Boris Johnson's proposal that there should be an Australian-style points-based system to be implemented when it comes to immigration policy in the UK. And there is an article that explains exactly why there is some contention with this. Sadiq Khan has urged the government to drop its proposed £30,000 salary threshold for skilled immigrants, saying it will have a damaging effect on Britain's post-Brexit economy. The Mayor of London urged the new Prime Minister Boris Johnson to fully recognise the positive impact immigration and freedom of movement has had in London and the UK, and called for City Hall to be given the power to offer fast-track visas for those wishing to work in the capital. Khan said the minimum salary threshold should be lowered to £21,000 a year, the equivalent of the London living wage, for the Tier 2 skilled worker, rather than the proposed £30,000. The government white paper on post-Brexit immigration policy released last year after a series of delays quoted recommendations from its Migration Advisory Committee that the salary threshold should be extended to £30,000 for EU nationals wishing to work in the UK after Brexit. Currently, all non-EU nationals must earn at least £30,000 to apply for a high-skilled visa. The government white paper proposes extending this threshold for EU citizens once Britain leaves the bloc. So there is one of the contentions. It's the threshold. It is considered too high. Why? Because it's too much of a barrier of entry for skilled EU workers. The minimum requirements should be lowered to £21,000, which is basically the living wage in London. So not really a skilled worker's job, but something that's barely above minimum wage, if not minimum wage, essentially giving them more of a free pass to enter the UK than other peoples from the world. I find it cheap coming from him, considering that his parents and my grandparents came from the generation way before the EU migrants came over here, where most of them came to the UK with nothing but the clothes on their backs and maybe some suitcases, and had to work for what they had. They had to work to be a success in this country. But now it seems we can just lower thresholds and make it easier for people to come into this country because? Well, it's because apparently we're too over-reliant on them, and if these people don't fill gaps, these gaps won't be magically filled. Khan said lowering the threshold to 21,000 would reduce by more than half the number of jobs held by EU nationals that would otherwise not qualify for the Tier 2 visa after Britain leaves the EU. The sector that would stand to suffer the most is construction and building, which would see jobs fall from 24,900 to 11,800 according to City Hall research. A number of ministers at the time of the White Paper's release, including former Chancellor Philip Hammond and former Business Secretary Greg Clark, raised concerns that retaining the £30,000 threshold would impede the public sector's ability to recruit staff after the UK leaves the EU and severely hinder the NHS. The white paper said the government would engage businesses and employers as to what salary threshold should be set. A consultation on the salary proposals is underway. Speaking at an event hosted by the London Chamber of Commerce, Khan said, "If the government's proposed immigration changes go ahead, then I'm fearful for the impact they'll have on the fabric of our city. The impact on the construction sector would make the housing crisis worse, and the impact on public services, including our schools and the NHS, could have devastating consequences for years to come. The new Prime Minister should instead fully recognise the positive impact immigration and freedom of movement has had in London and the UK, and immediately take steps to reform the immigration system in a way that enables us to unlock the potential of Londoners. If he is unable to do this, then he should let Londoners take back control and give City Hall the devolved powers that he previously called for as mayor." But regardless, I find this City Hall research to be a bit iffy because they're forgetting these gaps can already be filled by British workers. And before the left start saying, "Oh, you're just racist," no, I mean British workers, as in British people. You know, British people don't necessarily have to be white and working class or white and middle class or whatever. They can be Caribbean descent, African descent, Indian, Pakistani descent. I'm talking about the people who are already living here. People who may be out of work, people who may be entering the workforce for the first time, or people who want to enter a new industry. We have millions of people in this country who are ready and willing to learn the skills in this particular sector that they're worried about, or the NHS. It seems to me that this paper just omitted these people entirely, at least from what this article seemed to suggest. Why is it that we have to be so over-reliant on these migrants? Why do we have to be so over-reliant on them? Is it because they're a cheap source of labour? Is it because you'd rather have them rather than spend the money that it would take to train up British workers? Is that really what it is? Would you rather have British people work different sectors and EU migrants work other areas, and then also non-EU migrants work the non-skilled jobs as well? Because how exactly are they going to be a net benefit to the country if they're also depressing wages because they're adding more competition? How exactly does this unlock the potential of Londoners by bringing in other people who aren't from London? Because as far as I'm aware, London isn't doing very well at the moment under current immigration policy. And who knows, maybe, and this is just a theory, a game theory, guys, but maybe they don't want to pay people what we actually deserve. Maybe they don't want wages to rise. These globalists want wages to be depressed so that they don't have to pay British workers much and they get to pay these migrant workers even less, because as we know, a lot of these people are willing to work longer hours for less pay. It's ridiculous, and I don't think it should stand. I think if these people are going to be coming over here, they should be paid the exact same as we are for the exact same hours. They should not be having to take these bullshit deals. I'm sorry, I disagree with that. That's not how we should go about bringing in people to work. I think it's about time that we stop this over-reliance on immigrant labour, because it's just going to be a vicious cycle. We already have millions of people in this country already who can do the job or can be trained to do the job. We don't necessarily need to bring in more people. I don't think in places like the NHS and even in construction that British people are unwilling to do these jobs. If anything, there are millions of people in the north of England and the Midlands and in Scotland especially who would love to have industry back. Boris Johnson has already mentioned that he wants to strengthen the ties that bound the UK and to become less reliant on London and the South East by bringing jobs over to the north and to the rest of the UK. And apparently, Sadiq Khan is too busy worrying about his own city, who's already getting as much money as it possibly can anyway. And by the way, he's worried about the housing crisis. Well, first off, he needs to actually build the houses that he promised to build before he actually, complains about not having them not being built and not having enough construction workers, because he's not doing it himself. I think devolving immigration control to somebody like Sadiq Khan is a big no-no. In fact, I think that if we're going to devolve powers to English regions, scrap that. Why not just devolve it to England itself? But this is another topic for another day, and I think that his ulterior motive, it's really about bringing people who can probably vote for Labour and keep him in for his second term, is what he really wants. Or at the very least, to bring in another Labour mayor. I think that's probably what it's really about. And I also think that it's not just that, it's also scratching the backs of his corporate overlords as well, and Philip Hammond is doing the same. These politicians pretend to care about the EU migrants and the situation that's currently going on in the UK in regards to industry and employment. All they care about is making sure that they get their own money and that their friends get their money back in the city. That's all they care about. And until then, I think we do need to stop them from doing this, stop muddied interest and things like that, and actually, build this country for the benefit of our own people as well as others, if they would like to come over. And I'm all for legal immigration. However, it does need to be limited, because part of the reason why the NHS is having such issues and why we're struggling to build so many houses is because we have too many people not just being born, but also coming in. The more we bring in, the more we'll need to bring in, because these people are pushing the NHS to its limit, because these people also grow old if they choose to stay. And that just creates more of a burden. I don't suggest we completely end immigration. I don't think that's ever going to happen. I don't know if that's even feasible. Will it even fix the problem? Because these people are still going to get old and they're still going to have kids, as well as British people getting old and having kids. But regardless, I don't agree with this open borders policy. It hasn't worked. It just creates more and more problems. Until next time, guys, that's all I've got. So I'll see you later.